Let's bring in Omer Ozkizilcik. He's an analyst at the security department of the SETA Foundation, and he joins us now from Ankara. Omer, good to have you on the show now. Throughout the evening, especially for the past sort of half an hour, we've been concentrating on the foreign policy aspect of sort of the repercussions of the failed coup that's happened 3 years ago. Let's talk about it from a security standpoint. Now, this is actually a unique sort of organization. I think that's a sentiment that's been sort of reciprocated, echoed by several of our guests tonight. But I want to sort of get your take on it, because from the Turkish perspective, both the PKK is a terror group and the Fethullah Gülen, or FETÖ, is also a terror group, but they operate in very different ways, don't they?
Yeah, obviously they operate very differently from each other, but let me bring here another perspective, another point of view into this discussion and today's topic. First of all, the difference between the PKK and the FETÖ is that one of them has infiltrated the Turkish institutions. So, for example, the Turkish Armed Force or the Turkish Foreign Ministry or the Turkish security apparatus, all of them were infiltrated by the FETÖ terrorist organization. And in the coup night, most of them were active and involved. And only after the coup night, we have seen a cleansing of the Turkish institution from these FETÖ members. So actually what happened there was that before the FETÖ was being organized inside the Turkish institutions, so there were two channels. The first was the formal channel, from which is a formal channel from the superior, from the executive to the state employer on the very little ground. But we had also a second channel, which was the informal channel, and this was the dangerous part. So we had a parallel state structure within the Turkish state, and the FETÖ members have not listened to the superior, the formal superior, but to the informal superior from the FETÖ terrorist organization. So, for example, a teacher who was the superior of army officer of a FETÖ member had more to say for him, and he listened to this teacher of the FETÖ terrorist organization rather than his superior in the Turkish armed force. And this have brought some difficulties for Turkey's foreign policy, because there was on one side Turkey's national interest, and especially Turkey's national security threats perception and interests, but on the other side we had the FETÖ terrorist organization who had its own interests who benefit its own cult only, ignoring the risk for Turkey in its entirety. So, for example, let's bring up the issue of Syria. We had Semih Terzi, who was responsible for the operations of the Turkish armed force in Syria, and he had the control over the border region and the operations going on across the border. And we know that he was a main figure in the coup night and that he was a senior FETÖ member. But let's speak about it openly. What happened when he was on duty? He, as a FETÖ member, had pursued and acted not only for Turkey's national security interests, but also for the interests of the FETÖ terrorist organization. So therefore we had this dilemma and difficulty, and this made the Turkish state institutions incapable of acting. And actually the process after the coup also showed that the FETÖ members inside the Turkish institution explicitly overlapped and highlight and decreased proofs and message information which was gathered to prevent a terrorist attack. So we had much more terrorist attacks in Turkey than we would have if the FETÖ terrorist organization wouldn't have so much infiltrated Turkish state. But after the coup attempt, for example, in Turkish armed force, a third of the personnel was cleansed from the Turkish armed force. But despite the first expectations that the capabilities and capacity of the Turkish armed force will decrease. Actually, the quite opposite happened. The Turkish armed force launched two major military operations in Syria, and they launched several in northern Iraq. They are doing many drills in the east of the Aegean Sea. So we have seen that with the cleansing of the Turkish armed force, we have a much more effective Turkish armed force than before, and this makes Turkey more efficient in pursuing its national security interests. So to sum up, before we had the dispute between Turkey's national interests and interests of the Fethet cult, and now we only have the national security interests of Turkey, which is the main agenda and topic of the Turkish armed force and other Turkish institutions as well.
Omer, thank you for that sort of lengthy explanation.